Welcome, everybody, to the podcast. Michael's still over here struggling to get ready, but we're starting because Greg's got to get his kids home.
I'm still talking.
We got a board meeting in
what
1
happens
hour.
when you force me in a room like this.
We got a board
so
meeting to get
thin.
to. Greg's got kids to get home, and Michael's just got a birthday celebration for him tonight.
I got more
That's
than
all
that.
he's
Birthday
got.
tomorrow.
Michael
more
is
than that.
28 tomorrow.
Yes.
As of the watching of this video, it's his birthday.
Happy birthday, Michael.
Happy birthday to me.
Way to go.
Happy birthday to you.
Well,
pretty uneventful
Sunday,
birthday for me.
Yep. This was a great weekend. I heard a fantastic message on Sunday. It was wonderful. It was on God's invisible army from Elisha and the invisible angelic army from Pastor Steve.
About to say down in
Gaines,
Bellevue.
Bellevue Baptist Church in Memphis.
Well,
But I read a great message about 4 times before I got out there. I did. I read the notes.
It
He had-
was. Gosh,
Greg, I'll just tell
so
y'all,
many
Greg
versions.
had about 5 drafts of this message, and it just kept getting better every time.
Oh, my
A
word.
couple of times because he did what I told him to do.
This was one of
Not
those
that I
ones-
would take credit
Oh,
for
please.
anything.
Yeah. No, it did. You did, man.
These one-hit wonders, if y'all don't know, are hard to study for because you've got to tell the background of the story and try to condense, however many verses. I know Obadiah was 21.
This one was
Philemon is
24.
24.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with 2 John, which is only, I think, 13 this week, so
Yeah.
it's condensed. But you're telling a story and trying to take you're trying to talk about the background of a book of the Bible and the author and then
man.
condense the message and do it in 35 minutes. And that's a job.
This one went about 38. So just
Wish I could have been here to glare at you at the end.
yeah, it was just kind of like, okay, here we go.
You know, there are people out there thinking, well, why do you condense it? Just let the Lord have his way.
Man.
You know, it's wonderful, and we do let the Lord have his way, but, man, we've got 4 services a weekend, and
Yep.
you're bearing down under knowing that sometimes that next one is coming. And, hey, we always say God can do what he wants, but we got to make good plans
That's
to do
right.
4 in a row. So it's a big weekend. But you did a great job pulling that message together. You
Thanks.
hit it well.
It was fun.
It's an incredible story. You've got Onesimus, who is a runaway slave. He serves a guy named Philemon, which is the title of the book.
Right.
And he runs into Paul in prison, and Paul knows Philemon, and he sends the guy back to him saying, go back and make everything right.
Yep.
You know, you left and you left with unfinished business. Let's go back and make it right. And Paul tells Philemon, if I owe you anything, I'll pay you. If he owes you anything, I'll take his debt upon
Right.
myself. I mean, it's this incredible story. You've got slavery, you've got servanthood, you've got forgiveness, you've got restoration, you've got God in the coincidences of life bringing people together. There's so much there. But you brought it out in such a great way, and I heard from a lot of people that it really blessed them.
Well, I appreciate it. It was you had mentioned the previous week when you were on Obadiah that's like, man, I've got a really great Sunday school lesson here of about an hour long.
Yeah.
and trying to really kind of craft it in such a way that it allows the scriptures to speak and not trying to say anything else other than what the scripture says, but also trying to put it in an organized fashion that it's easy for people to hold on to and digest. And man, I felt the same thing kind of going with this story right here.
Greg had asked me last week, and on Thursday, I was still struggling with Obadiah on Thursday and was needing to preach, had to preach it Thursday night. He
Yep.
asked me how it's going. I said, great message if I had an hour to preach it, but
Right.
I don't. So I've got to condense this down into 3 good things that Obadiah said, and you did a great job with Philemon. First of all, the gospel changes everything. Talk to us about that. Where'd you see that, Philemon, that
Yeah.
the gospel changes everything?
Well, I mean, to start off with, that's where Paul kind of begins his letter as he's talking to Philemon. He talks about just kind of how the gospel has changed him. He talks about how he really encourages him in the fact of his faith, how he's being known. He's hearing rumors about how much Philemon's faith has grown, as well as the fact that he loves all of God's people. And it's just a really great way to be able to kind of segue into this standpoint. And then you see it again in Onesimus. Onesimus runs away. He's getting out. He's not going to finish paying off his debt. He's not going to finish trying to work himself out of poverty. He just, more than likely steals money from Philemon, runs away, and runs into Paul. We don't know how long that time period was there, but he runs into Paul, and it's there that Paul shares the gospel with Onesimus, and it's to the point of his life is forever changed by the gospel, so much so that he's willing to listen to Paul and go back to Philemon and face whatever consequences may come his way. According to Roman law at that point in time, any kind of slave owner or servant owner had the right to punish any kind of runaway servant, runaway slave. And so that punishment goes anywhere from a physical beating to branding to the fact all the way up to death. He could have been executed, crucified. Some stories in there as well show that they were thrown into an arena with wild beasts. And so, I mean, that's the kind of punishment that Onesimus is possibly running back to, knowing that could be it, or he could be forgiven. He doesn't really know, but he's going to go back and own up to whatever comes his way. The gospel, the only way that happens is because of the gospel, right? The gospel absolutely changes everything.
You know, Paul spoke to masters and servants in Ephesians 6.
Mm-hmm.
He said, bondservants, be obedient to your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, and the sincerity of heart as to Christ. And we think of that, a bondservant in that day was someone who willingly made a lifetime commitment to serve in that household. They would put their ear in the door, in the door jamb, and they would drive like a piercing through their ear to symbolize that they had given themselves as bondservants. Then Paul says to the masters, and you masters do the same good things to them, knowing that your own master also is in heaven, and there's no partiality with him. So the thing that totally changes, the gospel changes, and it changed the relationship of masters and servants in the day. Because Paul is saying, first of all, master, you've got a master in heaven. First of all, and you need to understand that. The second thing you need to understand, this is not just your servant, this is your brother now.
That's exactly
right. And you said that. This is your brother. He's not just a servant in your household, and the gospel totally changed all that. You know, we struggle in our culture to talk about masters and slaves because we have American slavery, which was horrific and just in every possible way. It was one of the worst parts of our history, if not the worst. And the Roman system wasn't exactly that, but it was still they were working to work off a debt at times, and that sounds obviously better than just being owned and forced labor for nothing, indentured slavery. You know, that was just a horrible thing. But we have a hard time getting our minds around it. But the thing about it is the gospel didn't dissolve all the institutions of the day and all the systems of debt and repayment. You know, as unjust or as just as they were, the gospel didn't change that. It changed the people that operated in them and said, now you're brothers. You know, and that's powerful.
I mean, you know, that's what Paul said to Philemon as Onesimus is coming back and says, you can't see him. You know, you don't see him anymore as a slave. He's not returning to you as a slave. He's returning to you as a brother. He's no longer the slave who ran away, but the brother who returned. It is a complete change in the way that you're seeing that individual.
I thought about in the midst of this, kind of the gospel changes everything was really a big theme of your whole message. You then divided into 3 different specifics of it. But we talk about God's plan a lot and things like that. And I thought during this, like, I mean, what a better person to run into than Paul when it comes to the radical changing power of the gospel. I like to think that, you know, there were some conversations of like, you don't know what I've done. And Paul's like, buddy, you have no idea what I was doing. Like, I was persecuting Christians, killing Christians, if not killing them with my own hands, assisting in killing them. And yet, you know, that guy ends up writing the bulk of the New Testament. So there wasn't a better person to run into than Paul in that situation. There's almost nobody else you can point to in Scripture. There's a bunch of people, but like, that had that radical of a transformation where you go from anti-Christian, hating them, persecuting them, killing them, and you end up actually being like almost like God's mouthpiece to the rest of the world for the vast majority of the New Testament. It's just what bigger testament of the gospel changes everything is there than Paul?
I mean, he's sitting there. I mean, they encounter each other while Paul is in prison. Right. Like, I mean, he's chained up. I mean, he's been arrested for preaching the good news. I mean, you talk about it, you know, just the further of that, he was arresting people and having them, you know, murdered. Right. And he's the one who's being imprisoned for preaching that same good news.
It's amazing Paul's resilience in the face of imprisonment and unfair treatment and everything. Paul never let that unfair treatment of others against him stop him from doing what he was called to do. And that's another important message, I think. There's
Yeah.
so much in Philemon.
Sure.
But important lesson is, from Paul's standpoint, is that no matter what trial you go through, it cannot stop the work of God in your life and the work he's called you to. Because Paul wrote some of the greatest writings in the Bible, in the New Testament,
Right.
from prison.
Yeah.
I love the book of Philippians. It's probably my favorite book in the Bible. It's written as Paul was a prisoner.
Right.
Paul directed churches from prison. Paul preached, if you will, from prison. He led this kid, this slave, to the Lord in prison. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
I always find
powerful.
it fascinating that, like, if you don't read into some of those books Paul wrote, that you would never even think about him being in prison. You wouldn't read this and be like, this is a message from a guy who's in prison.
No.
It's
No.
it's as if he's at his house.
Right.
Is what it sounds like,
You
just
read-
from the language. It you would never guess the situation that he was in when he was writing all of this.
You read Philippians, and it's like, this must be a guy at the top of his game because
Yeah,
he's talking
yeah.
about joy.
Right.
Now, he tells you in the book,
Yes,
I'm in
some of
prison.
them.
Yes.
but he said it myself. He said, the things that have happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And so, golly, that's just, whatever trial comes your way, if you're in Christ and he's in you, it's
Yep.
just going to go, the work of the gospel is going to go forward if you just keep following
Follow
Jesus. You
Yeah.
know?
Love it.
So it does change everything.
Yep.
Change the way you see others.
Yep.
Change the way you see yourself. You said it changes how we prioritize relationships.
It you just kind of follow how this story lays out there, and the way that what Paul addresses. Paul recognizes he's got Onesimus there with him. He's serving, alongside Paul, helping him out, being a great companion. Paul's under house arrest at that point in time. It's kind of the way that we would equate it. And, Onesimus is there helping make sure his meals are taken care of, running errands for Paul, just being a good friend and being a good companion. Onesimus's name means useful. And he kind of even says in there to Philemon, he wasn't useful when you had him, but man, he's found his place now. He's found his opportunity to serve. And, but even with all the work that was going on, it wasn't as important as restoring the relationship between these two individuals, between Philemon and Onesimus. And so Paul sends him back, and man, just really drives home the value and the importance of two individuals being reconciled when the opportunity is there and available to be able to do that.
I mean, if it was some sort of an unjust servanthood situation,
Mm-hmm.
it may not have been. It could have been that Onesimus owed a debt
Yeah.
to Philemon.
Yeah.
Maybe he, who knows, built him a house or
Sure.
sold him a car. We know that didn't happen, but let's just say he
Sold him a
owed
buggy.
a chariot,
A
maybe.
chariot.
I don't know, a donkey. I don't know. But he sold him something, and he said, I'll work for you for a year to work off that debt.
Mhm.
And then he disappeared after 6 months.
Right.
That could have
That could have been it.
absolutely been.
Yeah.
It was not normal, and probably in this particular context, to go capture somebody and say, you're now my slave.
Right.
There was a system, an economic system,
Yeah.
whereby, and some of them were paid, we know. So whatever it is, he ran out on an agreement,
Mhm.
really, very likely. If it had been anything else, I would have just said, just keep running, bud.
Right.
What interests me here is that Paul is like, hey, let's make this right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can't undo every wrong that you did before you met Christ. But if there are wrongs that you know about that you can undo, I believe you should.
Right.
Most of the time. If we're dealing with a toxic, dangerous person,
Sure.
sometimes it's better just to leave it alone and go on. Or if it's reopening a deep hurt that maybe everybody's gotten over and you don't dig back into it again.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's it. But, if you wronged somebody, go straighten it out.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a funeral home recently. I don't know if I've told this story, maybe not on the podcast, but there was years and years ago, 20 years ago or more, there was a person in town that ran a business that I felt like they didn't do our church right. I felt like they did us wrong, and I told them so. And I was very, very straight, and our voices got raised.
Mm.
Him and I, we were
Yep.
on the phone, and our voices got raised. And I knew I was a lot younger then than I am now, and I was a little more temper than I am now. And so I just told him off. I really did. Told him off and told him he was wrong and all that. I knew the business was still there, and I knew he was still there, and I would see him around town from time to time, and I didn't know if he remembered me. It's been so long. I was at a funeral home just maybe a year ago or maybe more, and I saw the guy, and the Lord just ministered to my heart and said, go make that right. Right in the room.
Wow.
And so I just said, man, can we talk for a minute? And I pulled him to the side and introduced myself. As soon as I told him where I was, it's like he realized that and probably wondered if I was going to start up again.
Here we go.
Here we go again. Gloves are off again. And the Lord just dealt with me and said, apologize to him. And I just told him, I said, listen, I'm sorry. I didn't treat you right. And no matter what you would say about the business dealing, I still think everything wasn't just right there. I would still have my opinions on that. But I said, hey, I'm sorry I didn't treat you right. And
wow,
that wasn't good of me. And I was a young, brash kid. Would you forgive me? And I asked him, I said, would you forgive me? And I held my hand, and he took my hand. He said, absolutely. He said, that's water long under the bridge. And thank you and all that. And that I just felt like 100 pounds came off my heart that I didn't know had been sitting there for 20 years.
Right.
So it's one of those things of go back and make something right.
Yeah.
That's good.
And that's what Paul sent him to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
In the face of
Whatever
really
could have
terrible
happened.
circumstances that possibly could be coming his way.
Yeah.
I've told people before, they said, well, I did this wrong. I said, go make it right. You know, I stole from somebody. I've told people that multiple times. I said, I stole from somebody. What should I do? Go pay him back.
Yeah.
Well, I stole from a lot of people.
Well,
pay him back one at a time.
There you go.
You know, incredible story coming out of this. I wish we knew what happened. What do they think happened?
Well, I mean, there are a lot, with verse 21 that's in there at the end of Philemon, it's Paul says, I have confidence that you'll do what I'll ask and even more. Most scholars sit in there and they believe that the even more refers to not just the fact that Philemon would show him kindness and forgive him, but actually set him free. And so, there's something that you lean into with the confidence that Paul had in Philemon, with the relationship that they had and how close they were, that most people feel like that's what happened. We don't know 100%. There's some thoughts and some theories that are out there. In Paul's letter to Colossians, he actually mentions Onesimus by name, that he's sending our brother Onesimus to you as well. So, he kind of leans towards that. There's another church tradition that's out there that believes that Onesimus became the bishop of the church in Ephesus. So, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I think that I think it is, probably well within our, reasoning and everything. Even though we don't know 100%, it's probably more accurate to believe that there was a resolution that came here and that Philemon did forgive and probably released Onesimus from his debt.
When we get to heaven, we are going to connect so many dots that we don't have connected now.
Yeah.
People who've studied the Bible for a long time and have a lot of questions, we're going to oh, wait a minute, that came through him. Okay, that was him.
Right.
There's a tradition out there, it's going way off, but that the church at Rome, a lot of the members of the church at Rome were actually members of Pontius Pilate's family.
Oh, wow.
That they got saved after the cross, and that perhaps even he did. And so that's a thinking that because there were those, what Paul say, the household of Rome.
Yep.
There were Romans in the Roman church, and there is a tradition, a theory that Pilate's family was part of the church at Rome.
Interesting.
We're going to connect some cool stuff when we get to heaven.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, great job. Love
Thanks.
the message. Way to go. We
Appreciate
go back this week. We're in 2 John. One of the things we'll talk about truth and love and how you can't have one without the other.
Love it.
See y'all next time.
See you around.